Welcome to Raising the Circle, a show that's spotlighting sustainable and circular businesses in Denmark. Here, we dive into the minds of the change makers, reimagining how we live, create, and consume in a more sustainable way. Today's story begins with something unexpected, pasta made from bread waste. But it's not just about the pasta. It's about turning food waste into a powerful movement. Today we'll meet Leif, the curious and co-founder behind Eat Wasted, a Copenhagen startup that's changing how we think about food waste, one slice of bread at a time. Leif and his co-founder, Jorge, started experimenting in the basement with just a tiny pasta machine. And now it's grown into a global mission to feed people food waste, and also to prove that both delicious and responsible can really go hand in hand. So far, what they've done is donate over 10,000 meals to food insecure communities. They've partnered with soup kitchens across Denmark and saved tens of thousands of slices of bread from going to waste. And really, this is just the beginning. If you've ever wondered what it's like to have one ingredient that can start something much bigger and be used in a new way, this is what we're going to explore. It's a business that's rooted in creativity and values and also carbs. So we're going to dive in and talk to Leif. We're now in the production space, so let's go. A little Eat Wasted. Come on in. Hello.
Hey.
Long time no see.
Welcome.
Thank you. We are in your production space.
Yep, here in Copenhagen.
Okay, one of the production spaces.
Yes.
And we are in the Eat Wasted, where bread waste becomes pasta. So we want to hear, what does that mean? And how do you tell the skeptics that might be curious about the taste?
Well, yeah. Bread is sadly the most wasted food in the world, and so we set out to turn that into a new product. And we collect surplus bread from bakeries, and it's the bread that is misshapen or doesn't rise enough, or maybe they just overproduce. So it's not bread that's going moldy or doesn't taste good, and that's turned into flour, and then it's used as an ingredient in the pasta. So it's 25% bread and then a mix of other flours, which is what allows us to keep this elasticity and bounce and delicious taste that we associate with pasta. So really you're saving about one slice of bread for every portion, but you wouldn't really know that it's made from bread waste, which is kind of this goal we set out to achieve.
Yeah, and it's a lot of slices over the years and over time, yeah. Do you know how big of an impact so far, how much you've saved from being really wasted?
I think last year it was around 50,000 slices of bread, and this year we've scaled up our production quite a lot. So I think probably in the first few months of the year, it's more like 30, 40,000. We need to check exactly the number.
Yeah.
And we've now donated over 10,000 portions of pasta with this one-for-one model we have.
Super.
So that's pretty exciting as well.
Cool. And before you were working with industrial bakeries.
Yeah.
You were knocking door to door on Copenhagen bakeries.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that journey?
Well, when you start, you go to the bakeries you know about as a consumer, which are the small bakeries, and they were, to be honest, not super into the idea of giving some random people their bread. And it was really hard. They either told us they didn't have waste, which is just not true for the most part, not in all cases, or they just were skeptical of this idea to turn it into pasta. And really, there was one bakery, which was Heart, which said yes. They were the only one in the beginning that said, sure, we'll help you figure this out. We like forward-thinking ideas, and we want to support this and build a system. And so they were really great. This manager named Mass, he spent time with his staff trying to figure out how to do this safely and efficiently and make it easy for everyone. And ultimately, we've now moved. We still collect from Heart. They are now kind of a small chain, so they send the waste back to their production facility, but we also now work with more industrial scale bakeries.
Okay. And why bread waste?
Well, because it tastes a lot better than spent grains.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Bread is, as I was saying, the most wasted food. So that was really one reason. And also it's made from simple ingredients. You know, flour can, same thing that goes into bread goes into pasta, and so it just makes sense as this culinary base and an ingredient that you can do a lot with. And bread also goes bad fastly, so fastly.
Yeah, fastly.
It goes bad fastly, that bread. And,
Yeah, true.
you know, 3 days, a loaf of bread is not really good anymore, but when you turn it into pasta, it lasts for 3 years. And there's so many places it can go and people it can feed, so that's really the vision behind what we're trying to do.
Beautiful. Thanks. We'll cut to a new shot where we dive into more of a conversation. Okay.
All right.
So we're going to dive a little bit into your childhood
All right, let's do it.
and look behind the scenes of what did sustainability and what was it like growing up in your home in these themes.
Well, I would say like the main exciting thing in my home was always food. And we also spent a lot of time outdoors. Sustainability wasn't looked at, I guess, in the way my siblings and I look at it now. I think it was more just we would always spend a lot of time hiking, going outside, and so I cared a lot about nature, but I don't think there was like the same, and you know, I eat like recycled and composted food and whatnot, but it wasn't, and I had a reusable water bottle. There was like those baseline things that I
Classics.
think just as a Canadian you do, but like we were not thinking about, I don't know, like the carbon impact of the food we were eating. So I definitely didn't grow up in a house that was radical in a sustainability standpoint. I think it was more just like a care for the environment and the outdoor world, and also like good food, I guess, kind of like tied into that. And my parents would, you know, go like buy unpasteurized milk from this farmer named Grant, and it was always like trying to support small farmers, and it was just not seen, I guess, in the way that like maybe sustainability is more looked at 10 years. I don't know. Like the early 2000s, it was a different time still.
It's more of a lifestyle. And how did you find your way with food waste, merging with the food insecure communities that you've been working with? How did you merge those two worlds?
Well, it kind of came in two ways. First of all, there was this big emphasis on both feeding people and not wasting food. I mean, my grandparents were first generation immigrants on my dad's side. They grew up in displaced, my grandfather was in a displaced persons camp after the war. His parents, my great grandparents, were Holocaust survivors, and so it was just not something that you did. You know, there was never food that was thrown out because they knew what it was like to actually go without food. And at the same time, they were always feeding people. My grandfather would buy bread and he would store it in his like garage in this big freezer, and he would give it away to people who needed a meal. I mean, there would be also like Jewish households. There would be Muslim families eating at the dinner table. And I say that not only Muslim families, but like everyone was just welcome. And the mailman sometimes, like even I remember like visiting my grandparents in Montreal, and like the mailman was just having breakfast with my grandfather because he like insisted that he would come in and have food. So it was just always like everyone was welcome around the table, no matter who you were, and food was never thrown out. And I guess as a kid, I never like connected those two things. It was just, you don't throw out food, and if somebody's hungry, you feed them. And it was only as I got older and started working in restaurants and saw so much food going to waste, at the same time that I would walk home and see people who didn't even have enough to eat, that I started to realize, okay, like this is a bigger problem. And actually, these are two problems we look at separately, but in my eyes, they were always interconnected, because I was in restaurants seeing all this beautiful food just going to waste and asking myself, why don't we just use it to feed people in our community who don't have enough to eat?
So always, yeah, merging it back to the community element. And before that, you were playing around with food a little bit, I hear, in your teenage years of ramen. Can you share a little bit about it? And then what learnings did you take from that whole venture into Eat Wasted?
I mean, I was always starting and working on various food businesses. I think the first thing I was doing was running this kind of supper club, and it was kind of similar to like, I don't know, the dinners that we began hosting with Wasted. At first it was just like friends coming over, and people started paying for those dinners, and then they grew into restaurants and different locations. And that was always something my friends were helping with, and I would just get to be creative and cook. And then I kind of reached a point as I was in high school where I wanted to make food that more people could access, and I was sort of on this trajectory in my mind of opening a fine dining restaurant. I was working in restaurants since I was quite young and loved the story and the thoughtfulness that goes into fine dining and the pressure and the kind of beauty that gets created with this whole experience of hospitality. But as I started working more in that world, I was both like frustrated by the social distance of all this food going to waste, and also the people we were cooking for were just not really people that, as a 16-year-old, I wanted to hang out with and make food for. And I had way more fun cooking for my friends. So I think I started to think, like, all right, how do I make something that's more accessible? And that's initially how I started to make food products. The first thing was a cereal that you would pour iced coffee into, and there was a bunch of others. And the last project I worked on before Wasted was a chocolate bar made out of instant ramen. And it kind of came working with this chef that I was friends with. He was living in New York. He was my age. We were both in high school, and he was kind of doing these ramen kits during COVID, and we met over Instagram, and just was one of the first people who I think shared my love of food in my social circle. And he wanted me to make a snack because he saw these like cereal things I was doing, and I was like, okay, I'll make something with instant ramen. And I put a piece of instant ramen in the toaster, and when I took it out, I kind of was reminded of this like dessert my grandmother would make with matzah, which is like a toasted kind of cracker, and chocolate and caramel. And I was like, maybe I can make a chocolate bar out of this ramen. It's crunchy, it's salty, it'll taste great. So I created that, and that began to kind of grow and get some traction, and it was sold in some small chains and stores. And I kind of reached an inflection point where either I needed to go kind of invest in it, find someone who would fund it, and find a bigger factory to make it, or buy machines, or I kind of had to close it down. And I was starting to feel like it was not really my mission to make chocolate bars. There was this, and it was something I was wrestling with, but there was a specific moment I kind of remember where I was driving through Hamilton, the city I was living in, and there's a lot of food insecurity and a big homeless crisis in Hamilton. And this guy just like came up to the window of my car at a red light and knocked on the window, and I rolled down, and he said, like, do you have any food or money? And I was like, I have no cash. I had like hundreds of ramen bars in the car, so I just gave him some ramen bars. And I just felt like such an asshole driving away. Like, he doesn't have teeth. I'm like, I gave him an instant ramen chocolate bar that he probably can't even chew, that's not helping anybody, actually. And I just really wanted to try and solve this problem. And for me, I think the thing that I felt more, I guess, upset about was the fact that there was people who didn't have enough to eat, and using surplus food just kind of felt like the solution to that problem. But it came first from seeing people who were hungry in my community, and I didn't like that. And so I pretty much from there decided, all right, I'm done selling instant ramen chocolate bars. I'll leave this for someone else. And yeah, that was the early inspiration for Wasted.
Which has such a big mission on feeding people food waste, but also giving back to communities, right, through donation, through canteens, through soup kitchens all around Denmark, but also what I hear reaching further to other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, really, bread emerged in my mind. It's the most wasted food in the world, and coming from kitchens, I also had so many ideas of what could be made from bread. You know, it's this like blank canvas, really. And so I had a huge whiteboard in my childhood bedroom, and I started to just, during COVID, think about, okay, like what could be made out of surplus bread? And I had all these ideas, and I really wanted it to be a food that, you know, was like an everyday food that was accessible, and, you know, pasta just felt like the right thing. And I also wanted it to be something that could feed people who didn't have enough to eat. And pasta also is used in soup kitchens. And initially I wanted it to be something that like we could distribute directly on the street and people could eat. But then I sort of learned that actually there's this whole infrastructure of incredible charities that are already working to feed people, and they often have to buy pasta because it doesn't go bad. So like all these things kind of connect, and I was like, wow, if we could donate pasta for each box we sold or kilo we sold. I didn't really understand the model at that point. it felt like we could create a system that was a for-profit business, but that would have a more lasting impact beyond, you know, raising money to start a soup kitchen, which is incredible. We need that too. But I guess I had this fear that if it was a charity, it might end at one point, you know, if we couldn't raise more money or if an economic crisis came. So I wanted something that could just really live on beyond our team, beyond me, or beyond one cycle of charitable funding.
Sounds like weeding in a network of different key players, showing their strengths, and then you focusing on where your strengths are. And it seems like it led to some pretty incredible successes in the last year. One of the key wins this year was then cooking for Noma, one of the best restaurants, the best restaurant in the world. And yeah, that seemed to have a huge effect on going social media viral with 2.2 million views and a 15 increase in audience. So 15 times increase in audience, so congrats to that. And I'm super curious how it was to achieve this dream and then hear these remarks and finally bring your product to another environment that you mentioned was a bit of the early dream of cooking in your own restaurant or creating something yourself.
I mean, there was a few steps to get there, which are maybe helpful to share. I mean, the first was coming to Copenhagen and meeting my business partner, Jorge, who was really the first person before there was even a product that tasted good to believe in this vision. And that was, I think, something where we both were raised in a similar way and had a similar ideology. And so he really just understood from the beginning and wanted to be part of it. And he really helped build like the whole brand and community side as I developed the food side. And yeah, we started not far from Noma in my courtyard, which happened to be nearby. And we started working with their bakery. And so like slowly we kind of were like around their circle, and really like we didn't go cook at Noma for a marketing video. That wasn't the plan. It sort of just ended up happening that way. But it was just something we all wanted to do. I think I kind of gave up on this fine dining dream, but it was kind of part of a childhood fantasy to go work at Noma and experience and sort of see behind the scenes. And so one day we sent Chef Rene Redzepi a DM, and I just said like, hey, can we come cook you guys staff meal? And it was always something working in restaurants where I loved when there was like a special staff meal. And you know, what we do all starts with food and cooking for people. So we went, and I actually didn't even know if Chef Rene would be there, but he was, and he, you know, also I think really believed in the mission and liked the product, and that is always what it comes back to, especially when you're a chef. And so, yeah, he really like stood behind it, and I have a lot of appreciation and respect for him, but also like how he takes time to like support the new kids on the block and give back, and it had a massive overnight effect on our business and brand, and the opportunities that we were able to kind of get from that moment were pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I'm curious, what's the seed? What was one seed you can share that came from that you're working on now?
I mean, the first was just the culinary community really started to support what we were doing. Like all over the world, chefs inviting us to come cook in their restaurants. People wanted to purchase the pasta, and you know, we couldn't really make enough of it when that happened. Like it was effect that kind of created way more demand than we had supply, but that also helped us then raise money once we were able to say, hey, we have all this demand, which kind of, it came from a few marketing moments, but I think the Noma moment definitely was a catalyst that helped us kind of balance the scales, because there was a lot of skepticism, like older people, especially the investment community, the large industrial food production community, told us, no, this won't work, the economics won't work, the demand won't be there. Like, yes, some like sustainable hippie kids in Copenhagen might buy it, but like this, there's just no feasibility. Like no one will want this on a real scale, or you won't be able to make it. It was just, I think, like too much of maybe a jump for like where the industry had been to where we wanted to go. And then having the, I guess, credibility from a chef like that, and then getting actual inquiries and purchase orders was sort of the catalyst we needed to then go get the funding to actually make more product. So it was pretty powerful. And yeah, there was a similar moment with another chef that we all really admired named Massimo Bottura, and that also had a massive effect. So it was kind of the combination of these two really powerful culinary figures supporting something with a mission, and I think that's why they did support it, that has allowed us to actually make an impact.
And the one that you mentioned now was also just showing up and saying, hey, we have something for you, right? When you were visiting in Italy to Massimo Bottura. Sorry, maybe I'm saying his name wrong. So this is so small, I cannot see from an old phone. Yeah, where you pitched him cold and his response was, this is how we change the world. So it's incredible. It must be incredible to see chefs seeing the momentum or the interplay of food and food insecurity and food waste, kind of creating a new narrative and changing the industry, is what I hear.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I was super inspired by Chef Massimo Bottura and the work he's done, and not just in his restaurants where they do a lot with waste and creativity, but also in these social spaces he's created where they cook for the homeless community with waste. So it was a huge inspiration and something that I really wanted to be a part of. And, you know, we had this model where we donated food, and I wanted it to go to, you know, people who were being fed with dignity and care, and I thought, you know, there's no better place than this Food for Soul organization and their refectorios. So that was kind of the inspiration with which we went, not having a plan or really any contact with him, but I ended up waiting outside his restaurant and chasing him through the streets of Modena. And, you know, I think there's two things. It's one, the mission that he really resonated with and understood, but I also think that this project emerged from some of the problems we have with restaurants. And it's not that chefs don't care. I think everyone who's been in a kitchen and has thrown out food, it's upsetting, it's hard. And then you walk home and see people who haven't had anything to eat. No one wants that. And that's why, you know, Massimo Bottura has started this charity with his wife. And that's why, I think Chef Jose Andres is feeding people with World Central Kitchen. And it's like in the nature of chefs to try and do that, and cooks to feed people. It's, you know, what we do. And so that kind of tangible understanding is, I think, why they were so receptive to it and wanted to support us.
Beautiful, beautiful network winding and interweaving important themes. But talking about all the successes, I'm sure there were many, many lows and maybe even some key moments where you thought, I'm quitting. Can you speak to some of those? And then what was the motivation that kept you saying, no, there's got to be more. There's a reason I'm doing this.
I mean, if we didn't have a mission, I would have quit a long time ago. That's the reality. For sure, there's hard moments starting a business, especially if you're trying to do something new. And particularly in the beginning, it was just like this chicken and egg problem of not being able to get the funding to make more product, and then not being able to fulfill demand, so we couldn't really scale the business. And it was just like this catch-22 that was challenging to be in. And I mean, yeah, probably just not having a lot of resources is hard, like with any business. And I think anyone who started a business knows like the stress that comes with not being sure where you're going to pay for the invoices that people are sending you, or the staff that are working hard and trying to and it's not specific to Wasted. I do genuinely think that almost every small business has that. So that was definitely challenging in the beginning, and I think something that's also like good to be honest about, that hey, when you're starting a business, like there is this like valley of death where it's just going to be really freaking hard to pay for things. And maybe some like tech companies where you are scaling super fast, like it's not every business that has that, but especially with food, like it's just really hard to make more and scale food production, and it's expensive and stuff goes wrong and the product quality is hard to maintain, and all these things are pretty challenging.
Yeah, I imagine it takes a resourcefulness. Is that something that you were finding in each other with Jorge, your co-founder?
You know, I think for sure, like between the two of us, there was like a camaraderie, and when one person is having a hard day, the other person is hopefully having a better day. But to me, the thing that allowed it to work was the community that believed in this. And from the very, very beginning, there was this massive community of people that helped support our ideas and mission. And, you know, our two first employees were my two neighbors, Merit and Lottie, who for basically the first year helped carry pots, host events, set up tables, take pictures, organize volunteers. So I feel like very grateful to have that community support. And there was, just last week we did an event, and I think it's been a while since we did a community event in Copenhagen. And also with the pasta, it's now like kind of a system, and we have a team, and so there's less need for the community to support it when we do new events. But we had this idea of making a bread waste ice cream, and so we just like posted on Instagram like, hey, can anybody help us make an ice cream out of surplus bread? It's sunny, it's summer, like we want to create something fun. And so many different people in the city message us saying, yeah, we can help. And one bakery, Anderson and Meyer, had said like, hey, we've been experimenting with this. We want to make an ice cream out of our surplus bread. And we were like, amazing. And then we didn't have an ice cream machine. So we asked again, like, hey, does anyone have a soft serve machine we can borrow? And like, soft serve machines are expensive. Like, if I had a soft serve machine, I wouldn't just like want to lend it out to some pasta dudes. But then Poppelberger was like, yeah, we have a soft serve machine. You can just have it for free. And then we get there and it's 200 kilos and we can't move this. And so we call a wine importer and we say, hey, can we borrow your forklift to move it? And it was just like this whole community that brought together this idea. And to me, that's kind of sums up the whole story of Wasted. People always wanted to help. And there's hundreds of stories I could tell you like that, which are really the only reason that this is working and growing and starting to make an impact.
Beautiful. It sounds, yeah, coming back to the collective and seeing the power in the collective,
Yes.
in the collaboration instead of competition, which is a unique side of it. And you speak about community as well, and from knowing and seeing how you've grown it completely organically, or in many ways, starting from a dinner of 5 people in 2022 to over 1,000 people in the last fewer bigger events over the last year. I'm so curious how that journey has been, and also if you have this like secret sauce of what it is to build a community, to truly nurture and build a community.
I mean, there's no secret sauce to building a community.
Pasta guy.
I think it comes back to mission. And people were coming to eat the pasta before it even tasted good. And that was hard for me, coming from kitchens and this culinary background. You don't put something on a plate until it's perfect. And Jorge really pushed me to say, hey, like, they're going to be part of making it perfect. And that was not something I'd ever tried or experienced, but people came because they were curious. And then they came back because there was this shared sense of doing something, you know, like food's going to waste. People are hungry. Like, all you need to do is sit down and eat this not so delicious yet food, and like, it will get better and we'll make more of an impact. And people kept coming back, and I think we did a good job of making it appealing, and Merit and Lottie did an amazing job of creating this atmosphere around these dinners. So we tried to make it fun and lighthearted and not feel like this huge burden to solve a problem. And then the food slowly got better as well, and then it branched out from the student community to like a community of young professionals and then chefs. And now I would say there's a very broad community, which is also something that I really am happy about, that it's not just like one niche of people that wears a certain type of clothes that can come and eat this. But to me, it all sort of emerged from this collective feeling of wanting to do something about the state of our world, about the people who are suffering in it, and giving people a really easy way to do that. And then, of course, I think it's in my nature and Jorge's nature, and now Alessio, who's joined our team as a partner, like, all of us are cooks. We like to feed people. It's how we grew up. It's how we spend our free time. And so it was just like natural for us to start hosting and cooking and taking care of people. And that sort of grew.
Organically, yeah. Beautiful. I've been there and I can see the mission and the love and also the creativity that's always involved with, like, even in the ice cream pasta story. Who would have thought to put those two elements of, like, pasta guys now making a bread waste ice cream cone? And it was an amazing day.
Yeah, it was great. But that's also what we need. We need more creativity. There's this chef that I really admire named Douglas McMaster. He has a
kind of one of the first, I think really, he pioneered zero waste restaurants and the kind of zero waste movement within the culinary scene. And I don't know if this is word for word, but it's something along the lines that he said that like waste is failure of the imagination. And I think it's so true that it doesn't need to be like one company that scales bread waste pasta and scales bread waste ice cream and all these things. It just needs to be a spark of inspiration. And I hope someone else maybe sees that ice cream and comes and tastes it and says, you know what, I'm going to start a bread waste ice cream brand or a shop, and goes and runs with that. And then we also, outside of one company, build community and solutions. And that's probably not the way the food industry used to work. And I think that's kind of why it's so fucked up. I think we need more collaboration from the people growing the food to the people eating the food, and like everyone along that journey to make it better.
Yeah, thinking of the whole supply. And now maybe we can dive a little bit into the future
Sure.
of what's to come. So end of 2024, you locked in your first investor. What is that like, and what new doors can that open?
Again, it comes back to community. We were trying to pitch investors who were focused on, to me, the wrong variables. Like, this has to make money, you know, and I do believe that in order for something to scale and make a huge impact, it needs to be commercially viable. But we wanted people who understood that the reason this would be a big business was because of the big mission, and not just capitalizing on an opportunity that food waste was a trend. And so we really struggled with conventional investors because they were just asking all the wrong questions. They didn't understand the mission, and I never really felt like they, and I don't want to be, you know, hating on investors. They have a job, and maybe it was just us meeting the wrong ones in this community, but we sort of had a radical idea, and we said, like, why don't we do this a different way? Let's go and make a video in our production space right inside here. And Jorge and I just went on camera. It was unscripted. We filmed it in an hour, and we basically said, hey, like, you've been supporting us, and because of that, this business and mission is growing, and we need capital to do that. And we want to raise it from people who understand our mission. And if you're interested in investing, like, fill in this form, tell us why you want to be part of this journey. And pretty much overnight, there was a lot of really creative, interesting people who understood the mission we're on and work in the hospitality or sustainability or food waste space and wanted to support us. And so that totally changed the way that we looked at raising money and allowed us to bring on a group of investors that is really supporting and trusting us to build this in the way that we want.
Beautiful. It seems like breaking conventions in the industry in the way that you work, but also with this let's just do it mentality.
I think that's the best like thing that I've learned is usually you just have to start and then you figure it out. And when you sit there making a business plan or trying to create some theory of how you'll collect bread waste at scale, it's just impossible. Like, this is another story that I've been thinking about as our like bread waste collection has scaled over the past kind of start of this year, really. It's ramped up a lot. And I'm just thinking back to when we started, so many smart people told us it will be impossible to collect bread waste economically. And at that point in time, we thought we'd collect bread waste from bakeries because we thought that's where bread waste was happening. And so we spent a lot of time trying to think and like creating maps, and what if we create an app that will do this, or what if we create a machine that will dry the bread in the bakery and then we can pick it up, or maybe that machine will be outside the bakery and maybe Uber can collect it, and like maybe what if we go at night, and then what if we use cargo bikes, and well, but like all of this, we were talking to engineers. And then at one point, like, I got a call from a huge industrial bakery, and they're like, hey, like, do you want to come meet us? We have a big waste problem. And I suddenly learned, like, oh my God, on the production level, there's a huge amount of waste. And maybe you're making hundreds of thousands of loaves of bread a day and you're wasting a small percentage of that, but it adds up really fast. And it's actually a safer place from a food authority standpoint to collect waste from. And the impact we can make is so much bigger. And so it was just an example of had we listened to people who were right. I don't think we really could have collected waste safely and economically and without a lot of logistical complexity from individual bakeries. But as soon as we kind of made this discovery that the big producers were wasting bread, which should have been obvious, but it wasn't, because this whole sectors very hidden away and kind of kept behind a big gate, we realized, well, actually, there's no problem to get as much surplus bread as we need, and really it's just how can we transform as much of it as possible into new products.
Beautiful, beautiful journey of interweaving new imaginations of how we do things. And with that, we'll kind of close on out. Yeah, I want to recall the day when you were that 13-year-old in the kitchen cutting shallots and kind of go back to that individual. And what advice would you give your younger self?
Talk less. I mean, I know this is a podcast, so I guess talking is relevant, but
talk less.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking about things, and I wasted a lot of time talking about things. And this is maybe not true for everyone, but for me, I learned way more and achieved more by just starting and just putting one foot in front of the other. And when you try and tackle a big problem, it can be super daunting, and there's no YouTube guide that's going to show you how to do it. But I think just like connecting, in our case, like one small bakery with one small pasta machine and a few people to come and eat that food was like the beginning, and that was the catalyst to then grow and lead to the next thing and the slightly bigger bakery and the bigger pasta machine and more people around a table. And you learn from doing, not from theorizing, in my experience. And I guess if I could go back, I don't regret anything, but I would have tried to start that earlier.
So talk less, take action.
Yeah.
I want to say not do more, because maybe it's not about doing more, but just doing.
Yeah. Less talking, more doing.
Less talking, more doing. Beautiful. Yeah, I would be curious to dream together.
Okay, let's dream.
Yeah, we can dream. In this world, we're talking a lot more about how can we change our habits to be more sustainable in minor ways or in big ways. And I would be curious from your perspective working in food waste and seeing the supply chain of food waste of what can people do today to be more conscious or more sustainable about food waste.
I think finding creativity to save waste in your home, in your office, in the companies you work at, and also creating solutions that make it easy. And I don't see that the big food industry is going to change for us. I think it means recreating products and systems that force the system and the food industry to change. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations doing incredible work that inspires me a lot. The FarmLink project is an example I talk a lot about, where a few college kids have basically saved hundreds of millions of meals and delivered them to food banks across America. And that is a real change, but it doesn't happen by, knocking on your local, politician's door and asking him to do it. It takes going out into the world and making it happen. And I think that's the shift that we need more, and I hope to see more of, where, again, it's less talking and more doing. Like, I felt very frustrated when I was in high school and going to these protests, and I was like, nothing is happening. Like, no one's changing something for us. The adults aren't going to save the planet on our behalf. It's kind of the world that we want to live in. I think we just have to go out and create it and make it for ourselves.
Yeah, having the courage and the bravery and also the creativity to make the world we want to see all together.
So I guess my dream would be a world where there is no food waste, and where the almost 1 billion people who don't have enough to eat and are severely food insecure have 3 delicious, healthy meals every day that they can enjoy. But my maybe closer term dream is that there will be a larger community of companies, organizations, not-for-profits, and people who are creating businesses that make the world better and contribute to not just the food waste crisis, but all of the big challenges that the world's facing. Because I think with the right intentions, businesses can really make a positive impact all over the world.
Yeah, they hold a lot of network and influence and power in those
And I'm a
levers.
believer in business, honestly. I just this weekend saw Yvonne Chenard from Patagonia speak, and it was deeply inspiring to see an example of this working. And I think it just comes back to the values, and not that he created Patagonia with just some values overnight. I know there's a lot of hard work and it doesn't always work for everyone, but I think at the core what I took from hearing him speak was they were really radical, but they also stood in those radical values. And when people told them it wouldn't work, they kind of doubled down and made it even more sustainable, more, of a good place to work. And all those things actually paid off. So, I mean, we got to try.
Yeah, I'm cheering you on. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, to share, and I'm so curious to see where Eat Wasted is going to be in, I was going to say 60 minutes, but more like 1 year.
I can't wait to see too.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I create these podcasts to inspire listeners to live more eco-consciously and to help us reimagine our systems with a more sustainable and regenerative lens. If you have any questions, feedback, or you want to get in touch, you can reach me on any one of my social media platforms or email me at raisingthecircle@gmail.com. Now, please do me a favor and spread the word by sharing this podcast with one person that you think might enjoy it. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.